Hey guys, it's Rogowy here, and we are doing another tutorial. This week we're looking at how to add emphasis to our photographs. And by emphasis I mean an area of the scene of our photograph that we want to draw our viewers into. And there's a number of ways we can do this. Obviously having a nice clear subject and not having any distracting backgrounds definitely helps. But we're going to look at some things we could do in Photoshop to add to our images to make them a little more appealing. So open up the week 4 Wednesday tutorial. You'll notice that there's 4 files in there: Colored Vignette, Fake Aperture, Selective Color, and Selective Focus. And we're going to look at each one. So, starting with Colored Vignette, we're going to look at something we've already looked at before. Drag that and open it with Photoshop. And give it a second to load here. There we go. The first way we can add some emphasis to our shot is to draw our viewers into the photo that we have already. So if we have subjects in our shot and we want to make them stand out a little more, we already know that we can add a vignette to give them a little bit more attention. However, we're going to look at a custom vignette, which we've done before, I think. And this is a colored vignette, so it's not just a regular black or white vignette. This has got some color to it. And so Command 0, open that up as nice as you can, fill up your screen. And we're going to start pretty basic here. Like I said, this is stuff that we've reviewed before. I want to start a little different this time. I want to start with the eyedropper tool, which is up here. And we are going to click this dark brown that is in the shadows of the wood. I don't want it to be completely black. I don't want it to be complete, like a noticeable brown. I want it to be kind of somewhere right in there where it's a very dark brown. Then we're going to add a layer. This time we're going to go Edit Fill. And instead of choosing black as our fill, we're going to choose foreground color, because what the eyedropper just did is wherever we click, that now became our foreground color. We're going to say OK. And I don't know how well it's going to show on the video, but this is not a black. This is a very dark brown that I'm seeing on my screen. So same steps as before. We go down to 60% for our opacity. All right, bring that down. And add a layer mask down here. All right, and let's use a brush with a very soft edge. And we're going to enlarge it so it's nice and big, something like that. And you want to make sure that your foreground color is black. And now what we're going to do is we're just going to click. We're not clicking and painting, we're actually just clicking, and we are putting the light where we want it on our subjects. I want to make mention here, very importantly, that the photos that I'm using, in some cases they're my own, but oftentimes they're not as well. I just find good examples on Google, and I want to make sure that in no means am I taking credit for the photography here. I'm just using them for educational purposes so that you can see techniques that you can use with your own photographs. So with that done, you can see that I've selectively colored them as the main focus of this shot. And then I can go back in my layers here and I can increase the opacity so that that edge around them becomes a lot darker. Now, what's the benefit of that? You notice here, it's not really a distracting background. It's this wood sort of edge background. It's not distracting, but I do like to isolate my subjects. I like to make sure that the people looking at the photograph are drawn to the subjects in the scene. So a vignette like this, again, we're drawing colors from what we already have in the background in this case. We're just darkening up the edges in a custom sort of shape so that we can see our subjects a little bit better. And just a little trick here, you can hold the Option key and you can click on your layer mask to see exactly what area you've painted out. And so I can see in here that I've missed this part, and I can actually go in here and paint on that and then go back, and I can see, if I looked at the before and after, I'd see that it lightened up that area a little bit. Okay, so save that. I'm going to save mine to the desktop. Call it Colored Vignette, sure, and save. Done. So that's an easy one. Next, we're going to open up the one called Selective Color. Drag that to Photoshop. This is an important one, which we've seen numerous times, and it's an effect that's used quite often. I find with my customers that they always ask me, hey, can you do the selective color or the effect where you leave one thing in color and the rest black and white? Well, that's what we're going to do here. I'm going to put a little bit of a twist on it because you should know how to do the old way where you've got the black and white underneath and then leaving one thing in color. If you're not sure, you can look at my other videos and I explain it in those as well. All right, what we're going to do with this one is we see that that umbrella is definitely the focal point of the picture. And in order to add more emphasis to the photo, we are going to leave the umbrella in color and the rest is going to go to a duotone in this case. So here's what we're going to do. Before we get started, we're going to press Command A so that our entire scene is selected. And you can tell by the little marching ants that we've got around the entire canvas, as you can see around the edges. And once that's done, we're going to go Edit, Copy. So we have just made a copy of the colored version of the file. All right, we got a copy of the full color version, and that's really important that you do that right at the beginning, because if you don't do it at the beginning, you kind of screw yourself up later. Then we're going to go to Image Mode Grayscale, or if you want to do it a different way, you can go Image Adjustments, Black and White, which is the way I prefer. And we can kind of tweak the intensity of the colors here a little bit. All right, so I'm just going to spend a couple minutes here making those colors look good, and hit OK. And then I'm going to go to Image Mode Grayscale. We're going to say Discard. Then we're going to go Image Mode again, one more time, to duotone this time. And from this window, if it comes up as monotone like you see here, we're going to click here, we're going to say duotone, then we're going to click that second color, and let's just put in some romantic beach type, oh beautiful, some kind of pink duotone, a romantic scene on the beach. And just remember, you have to name your color, so I'm going to call it salmon so that it sounds a little more masculine. Hit OK, and now you've got a duotone image. Then what I want you to do is go to Image Mode, put it back to RGB. I know it seems weird, but we've got our duotone image now. But in order for us to bring the color version back in, which is what we want to do, we have to set it to RGB again, and that will allow us to do that. So now, because we had copied the colored version, all we have to do is go to Edit, Paste, and now our color version comes in right on top of the duotone version, as you can see here. All right, so now we have a color version sitting on top of the duotone version of the image. Really important that your layers look like that. Then, click the Layer Mask button down at the bottom of your layers, and that should split your layers in two. Go to the paintbrush, make sure it's set to black. My brush is way too big, I'm going to make it smaller. And also I'm going to go and set my hardness to about 50% or so. And I'm going to paint out the color in everything except for the umbrella. All right, as you can see me doing right here. Okay, I'm even gonna paint out their legs. I don't know. I guess I could keep those in color, but for the sake of the tutorial, I'm just gonna leave just the umbrella in color here. All right, so go around your image, and what's happening here, just so I can explain while I'm doing this, is we are masking out the parts that we don't want, okay, the parts that are in color, and replacing them with the layer underneath, which is the duotone image. So that's what's happening here when we paint with black. Just a reminder that black is to hide and white is to show. So in case I screw up, let's say I go like this, and I'm like, oh no, I could undo, or I could just press the X key, and when I do that, you see how the colors swap between the two, and so then I just swap to white and paint the color back in, like so, and press X again to go back to black, and then I just continue on, making it look magical. And we're going to keep on going here, get all of this color out, just like this. All right, not bad, almost done. All right, and then if I really wanted to do it nicely, I could use my magnifying glass and zoom in and just make sure I get all these edges, so that's perfect. However, I'm going to stop there. You can see that this is another way that we can add emphasis to our photos. Now the parts that are in color or in full color really stand out, and then the parts that are either duotone or grayscale are less important. And in this way, we're kind of forcing the viewer to, we're kind of saying, hey, look at this. You know, I want you to look at this because it's in color and the rest doesn't matter. So that's why we do that. And that's why it's an effective effect. Okay, so I'm going to save it as Selective Color to the desktop, save, and we're going to continue on with the next one here in 1 sec. Okay, so now that we've got that saved, we're just going to drag this out of the way, and we're going to move on to the one called Selective Focus, and open that with Photoshop. With this image, press Command 0 to see it all. We got two fish in a fish bowl, and we want to selectively focus on one of the fish or part of the image and have the rest of the image blur out or become less important. Now, normally this is something you'd want to do in camera. You'd want to set your aperture. There's actually a feature of the camera called Selective Focus Zones that we're going to talk about later. However, due to the popularity of this effect being included in things like Instagram and those type of applications, I think it's important to note how you can actually fake this in Photoshop. And sometimes you can get a really pleasing result, especially if your ISO is nice and low and your image is nice and clean. It does work. So, okay, we got the background image. We're going to make a new layer. All right. This time we're going to go to the gradient tool. And that's this tool here. The shortcut is G. We're going to set the gradient up here to the second one, which is gradient or foreground to transparent. So you're going to see that it goes from the foreground color, which in my case here is black, and it ends up going to clear. It's really, really, really important that you change this here too. Set it to a radial gradient. That means that it's going to be a gradient that radiates from a center point and it's circular. So let's say this fish here is my focus. This is the one I want to keep in focus, and I want the rest to be less important. I could create a vignette, I could go with Selective Color. Let's say I don't want to do either of those, I want to just make the fish stand out a little more. let's say that I feel that his eye is the most important part of the image, which should be your focus if you're, working on portraits of animals or people. So let's say the eye is the most important. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually click in the eye, and I'm holding it down. I'm going to draw a line up to the area where I feel he should be in focus until. And so you can see that I'm going up to about the end of his body. I'm going to let go. And it's going to make this really ugly black blob over our image, which is actually what we want. All right, what we're seeing here, if I hide my lower layer, we're basically seeing the part of the photo that's going to be the most in focus. And as it fades out, those areas are going to become less in focus. And the areas that have nothing at all, depending on how much we set our depth of field, those will be the most blurred out areas. So here's a little trick. We've got the blob on layer 1, and what we want to do is we want to make a selection of that blob. And the way you do that, okay, is you hold the command key, all right, and see how my icon changes? Watch, I'm holding the command key, and you see how that changes to a selection, a hand with a selection? Click that little thumbnail, this is called a thumbnail here, click that, and now you see that that becomes selected. All right, so that circle I just created is now my selection. And even though we can't see it, that transition, that area that's fading out to nothing, is also selected. Even though it doesn't show here, it only shows a circle. The next thing we want to do is we want to actually hide that layer 1. We're just going to turn off the eye because we've got our selection now. We don't need to worry about it. And we're going to highlight the background layer instead. Now, good practice and something you should get in the habit of doing is if you are making adjustments to your images, duplicate the background. All right, duplicate it, and that ensures that the original doesn't get messed up. Now, we got a problem here. The selection that I've got right now actually is selecting the fish to be blurred and the rest to stay perfect. That is what always happens. So what we have to do is we have to inverse our selection. We're going to go select, inverse, and now you'll see that we've got our selection on the outside and the fish is excluded from that selection. All right, we also know that we got this transition from solid to clear in between here that we can't see. The rest is really easy. We can actually delete layer 1. I leave it up just in case I have to change it if it doesn't look good. We go to our background copy layer, and we're going to go to Filter, Blur, Gaussian Blur. And with the Gaussian Blur, we can bump up our radius. And if you look very carefully in the photo, what's happening is our background is blurring, but the fish is staying nice and sharp. So you can see if I pull it all the way down, there's the effect before. And as I go up, I'm giving the impression that the camera focused on the fish and blurred out selectively the other areas of the photo. So I'm going to go up to about 5 here, I think. That might be too much, but just to really show the effect. And I'm going to hit OK. Then press Command D on the keyboard to hide your selection, and there you go. There's what it looks like when you have selectively focused your subject like we see here. And now we've got more of a blurred background, which again draws the eye to the sharp parts of the picture. And in this case, it's the eye, it's our subject. Your eye should be drawn to that fish before it's drawn to the rest of the photo. If I go to Window History here, and I just look back at my original by clicking the top image, you can see it's a big difference, all right, from how sharp it was before to this kind of soft, selective focused effect that we created. All right, so let's save that. Go File, Save As. I'm going to put it to my desktop, Selective Focus, and let's save it and hit OK. All right. let's move on to the next one here. Okay, in the next one we're going to do here, this is the last one, we're going to move our window out of the way. We're going to open up the one called Fake Aperture. And this one kind of combines a few different things together to create an interesting effect, okay? So I press Command 0 to see all of my photo. You'll notice this is a great photo of a concept car here. I think it's excellent, but the problem is that the background here is just as sharp and just as clear as the car itself. Now, in this case, I don't really think it takes away from it, but if we wanted to make it better, we would, well, at least I would, set a shallower depth of field, a smaller aperture, and try to blur that background more. Now, we could use the selective focus that we looked at in the last one, but that's not going to work as well, and it's not going to look as realistic in a shot like this where we got a big subject, all right, and such a large, or such a weird shape. A circle, radial gradient's not going to work as nice. So here's what we are going to do. We're going to go into quick mask mode, and hopefully remember that you can click the bottom of your tools and that should look like that. It should become pressed down. Then what we're going to do is we're going to move over the car, and we're going to use the paintbrush using black to paint over the vehicle. And you should see the vehicle turning red. That means you're doing it right. All right, and don't worry, it's not like this is going to print or anything. We are painting our selection onto our image. So we're just going around the car carefully here, painting the image, painting the car. And I apologize because I'm kind of doing it quick here for the sake of the tutorial, but you know, go over it nicely. I'm going to just paint the middle of it, which should go quick. I'm going to use a big brush for that and just get those parts fast. And as I get to the edge, all right, then I'm going to start going to a smaller brush. Now, if I go off the edge, no big deal. I can quickly switch to the eraser tool and fix up the parts where I went off. No big deal. All right, and so I'm going to just go around the entire car like you see here. Kind of a cool looking car. All right, and I'm just going to continue on until my entire car is red. Almost there. Personally, I don't like working this far out from my subject. I would normally be like this, zoomed right in on my image and painting it nice and close so I can see that I'm getting the edge properly here. All right, but for the sake of the tutorial, I'm doing it pretty quick here. So let's just go around, let's just make sure everything's selected nicely. It looks like it's pretty good. I'm just touching it up a tiny bit. All right, I'm just going to check the other side of the car, go around here really quick. And it's okay to have a soft edge, as we'll see later. Yeah, actually, when you're creating depth of field, it looks more realistic to have it with a bit of a soft edge. All right, so I'm just going to keep going around here like that. That's not bad. A little touch up there. A little bit under here. All right, we're almost there. Just going to get the rest of it going here. All right, I can't really see where this tire is, so I'm just going to guess. I'm going to just kind of assume that the tire goes like that. Press Command 0. And that's pretty good. I mean, we got most of the car selected aside from the shadow areas that we can't see. All right, now what we're going to do is we're going to click the quick mask button. We're going to go back to standard mode, it's called. And you'll see that we have, and again, I don't know why Photoshop does this, we have everything but the car selected. Even though we painted the selection on the car, it selects everything else. So we have to go to Select, Inverse, and now we got the car selected. For this one, we are going to actually save a selection. And I don't know if you guys have seen that before or not, but we're going to go to Select, and we're going to go to Save Selection. And I'm going to call it Car. And what that does, I'm going to just hit OK, is in our Channels tab, you see where our Layers palette is over on the right-hand side, there's also a little tab called Channels. And if you click that, now you can see at the bottom of that, we have saved our selection of our car. That means that we can use it anytime. We don't have to redraw over the car. We don't have to do that again. And you can do that anytime. If you have an important selection in your image that you want to save for later, just save the selection like I just did there, and you can use it again later on. Now we're going to do another selection. This time, we're going to go into Quick Mask mode, and we're going to use the Gradient tool. And we are going to use a gradient still set from before with the foreground to transparent. And this time we're going to switch it to a linear gradient, which is the first block. And this just does a standard gradient, which is basically a vertical gradient. I'll show you what it looks like quickly here. All right, that's what it does. It does a gradient that goes across the entire image. What we're going to do is we are going to imagine here that our image had a shallow depth of field and it's becoming blurry as we get towards that background. So in order for us to do that, we are going to draw a line from about there to where the car is. All right, and at a bit of an angle. I'm not sure if this is the right angle. We're just going to see at a bit of an angle, and that was not enough of an angle. So undo, Command Z, and less. That's not bad. This might seem really strange, but that's the type of selection we want. All right, we saved the car selection from before, and now we have this selection for the background that's going out of focus as well. Click the Quick Mask mode, and again it does the opposite of what we want. So we go Select Inverse, and we're going to go Selection, we're going to go Save Selection. This one we're going to call Aperture, and we're going to hit OK. Whoops, capital P, that doesn't matter too much. Now don't deselect, don't press Command D, just leave this selected. This time we're going to go to our channels, and we still have our car saved there. This time we're going to hold Command and Shift at the same time. And you see there's a little plus symbol that shows up in the selection, the hand in the selection. That means we're going to add to the selection we currently have. So right now we have the aperture selected. We want to add the car to that selection. So we're going to go Command and Shift. And now you'll notice that the car becomes part of that selection. All right, just like that. All right, now what we're going to do is we're going to go to Filter, Blur, Gaussian Blur, and this might actually mess it up. Hang on, you know what? I just realized before I go any further that that's not the correct way. We actually want to subtract the car from the selection. We don't want to add it. That would mean that the car would blur with the background. We don't want that. We want the car nice and sharp. So sorry, we're going to hold Command, and we are going to hold the Option button. And you see, this is the nice thing about saving your selections. We can go back and change it after, no problem. So Command and Option, it now becomes a subtraction symbol. Click it, and now you notice that the car becomes subtracted from that selection. That's what we want. Let's head back to our layers. Let's hold Control and duplicate our layer. Remember, we don't want to mess up our original. We're going to hit OK. Now, all we have to do is go to Filter, Blur, Gaussian Blur, and add a bit of a blur to this. And I'm not going to go crazy. I'm going to go, let's see here. It's experimentation, so I'm going to go to about 10. I'm going to hit OK. Then press Command D. And now, if everything went well, your car should be very nicely in focus still, and your background should have blurred out considerably. And if I just hide the top layer and I just show you the difference there, that's what we're going for. We're going for that shallow depth of field look, which again is going to draw more attention to the vehicle here rather than the distracting background plus the vehicle. In this case, it was shot really well, really professional, but you can see that that makes the car stand out a lot nicer, in my opinion. And really quickly with the saved selection, you know, I can select the car if I wanted to. I can inverse that selection, so I got everything else selected. I can go adjustments, black and white for that. I can take the color out of that area as well so that the car really pops against the black and white, so it's a selective color. You can combine these different effects to really draw attention to what your subject is. If I wanted to, I could add a vignette. You know, I could have a selective vignette, and you can just keep on adding things. You don't want to go overboard, but you can make your subject really pop by combining these different emphasis techniques to your photographs. All right, so make sure you save that. I'm calling it Fake Aperture to my desktop. And if you got through that, awesome. Like I said, make sure you save it, hand it in to me, and I'd like to see you guys use these techniques from time to time in your own photographs.